What's up, Game Devs? T-Chan here, and welcome to episode 12 of Game Dev Loadout, where I chat with today's most experienced game developers 7 days a week. We will learn about their background, the obstacles they have to overcome, and the tools they use to reach success. And today's featured guest is Ted Aronson. Ted, it is go time. Are you ready?
Yeah, sure.
Awesome. So he is a programmer and designer with 6 years of experience working for studios such as Zynga, Mind Snacks, and he started Second Check Studio, which is a game consulting company focused on educational and therapeutic games. So go ahead, Ted, give us a little bit about your personal life and how you got started in the game industry.
Yeah, sure. I mean, like you said, I've been doing this for about 6 years. Right now I'm kind of focusing on building out Second Check Studios and doing some programming on the side for a university around where I live. But I guess how I got started, my first big company that I worked for was Zynga. And I actually landed that job because I had gotten an internship about 2 years before I got hired, with Electronic Arts. It was a game that was kind of set in the Command and Conquer universe. They never got released, but I really, really hope they did. They do eventually. I got this internship and, made friends with all of the, everybody on my team and also all the, the university relations staff in their, HR department. And then 2 years later, when it came time to look for, real jobs, I started looking around and found out that every single person on that university relations team had ended up at Zynga. So I was like, hey, what's up? And so, they found me a position at Zynga, and then, sort of history just kind of wrote itself. Before I got that internship at Electronic Arts, I was actually, the head of the local, game developing group at my university. Back then, we didn't really, there wasn't a big game development organization in my university. There was one or two kind of small little things in the local area, but we started a chapter of actually it's an organization called SIGGRAPH, which is an academic organization that sets out to study graphics. We had a chapter there that was doing animation, and a couple of people got together and said, hey, why don't we also do games, because that also involves animation and graphics, and there's a lot of people who want to do that. So I, over, a couple of years became the president of that. And then through that, got to know some of the people from the, university relations staff at EA, and then, got my internship that way.
Awesome. So you got a lot of experience with programming, designing, and now you're doing consulting. What do you consider your main area of expertise is?
The thing that I do the most, I think, is programming. But I think, the thing that I'm really passionate about and that I really enjoy learning about is game design, and particularly game design for educational and helpful games and things like that. Kind of like Jay McGonigal kind of stuff, where you're trying to get people to use games to get people to do things that help themselves in a way.
Yeah, that's really awesome, and I really appreciate you doing that. And what is something that we don't know about when it comes to educational games that we should know about?
Oh, geez. I mean, there's just so much, man. So there's a lot of different ways that you can design educational games. There's, there's the more simulation type games, the Kerbal Space programs, where you're actually playing the thing and you're learning about it while doing it. And then, there's the sort of just I'm going to learn this kind of tangential thing while I'm playing, the Civilization kind of things, where, you're learning about history while you're playing this game that's totally not about history, and then there's things to gamified flashcards and things like that. And, when I first started out, kind of looking at educational games, I saw all this, and I immediately said, this whole gamified flashcard thing is kind of it doesn't work. There's no way that it actually would work. There's no, I don't find it compelling and I don't find it useful. So there's no way it could actually work. But in reality, it actually works for a lot of people. So I think, one of the challenges with educational games is kind of you kind of look at the design of a game and you think, oh, that doesn't work for me. That doesn't fit with my learning pattern. And you kind of have to sort of break out of that, and realize that it actually works for a lot of people. And it's kind of similar to how not everybody likes the games that, certain people design, you might not like, Skyrim, but there's a ton of people who do, and that's so, different things work for different people. And that's one thing you got to really kind of keep in mind.
And give us an example of a gamified flashcards. Like, how exactly does that work?
Well, I mean, so Mind Snacks was basically gamified flashcards. And what we had was, we had a bunch of mini games. For example, there was this one game where you had a fish, and the fish was in a fishbowl, and there was like water draining out of the fishbowl, and it would present you, to like kind of prompt the player to do something. It would present like a word in a foreign language, and then it would present two possible translations as buttons, right? So it would say uno, and it would be like 1 or 5. And, the player had to press the right translation. And when they did, it would like, someone would come in and dump a little bit water into the fishbowl, and then the fish would, not run out of water and die.
Yeah.
So, things like that where like, where the content of all of it is kind of divorced from the gameplay. Like I could take that and turn that word from uno to, I don't know, what's the state capital of Massachusetts? And it would play the exact same way. You would just be learning something different. So that's kind of what I call gamified flashcards.
That's really interesting. And Nintendo did games like that, I guess, where I guess it challenges your mind, like the Sudoku. They had like it's called brain training, I believe, for the 3DS, and I really love games like that.
Yeah, those games are really cool. And so I've actually been working with a neuroscientist on one of my more recent games. And one thing that we've actually kind of realized is that like those games are good. They're not, they often don't really do all of the science that they purport to do. But what we've actually found is that games like that, but also kind of any kind of action-y kind of game actually exercises that brain. And different parts of your brain in different ways that can actually kind of improve your overall cognition in a lot of different ways. So just a fun little tidbit.
I've read stories about playing fast action-paced games. Yeah, it increases your reaction speed or something. If people want to get into like the educational side of gaming, what resources would you recommend they use to like try to get started or to learn more about it?
Oh, geez. There's a lot of people who kind of talk about this kind of stuff. I don't think there's, there have been a couple books that have been written on the subject. I'd say, I mentioned Jane McGonigal. Her book is kind of seminal in the field. So that's really good. Ian Bogost's, I think it's called Doing Things with Video Games, or How to Do Things with Video Games. That's also a really good book and just kind of like breaks down, different ways that games have done, have gotten their players to do different things. It's a little old. Like they talk about how Guitar Hero is like a really novel new thing. So, and that game's like almost 10 years old now.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's a little old, but it's kind of a cool study on like how to do, how to actually get your players to do particular things with games, including, educate them. But there's a lot of folks out there who are just like kind of talking about this and like giving talks about it. I'm a big fan of, Erin Hoffman-John. I think her Twitter handle is like Griffiness or something like that. But she works for a company that does consulting on that kind of stuff, and she writes a lot about, educational games, and that's good. Like anybody, most of the people who speak at like Games for Change, are really good people to kind of follow and learn from, and just like see what people have been kind of doing in the field. That's a conference every year that happens, I think usually around like June or April maybe. And they just talk about, it's kind of like an alternative GDC for people who are making games that kind of do something a little bit more than just entertain. So like, educational games or games for health or political games or things like that. And just generally anybody that speaks there. Paolo Pedercini, he's not really an educational games guy, but he has a lot of really good stuff to say about that. And, so there's a bunch of people out there that are kind of talking about this stuff. And I think, just listening to them is good.
Yeah, I would definitely link that up. Yeah, you mentioned a ton of names. So, Game Devs, I will link all that up on the website. Ted, what do you think your key principles for better game development? Like, what makes people want to play an educational game? Like, what gets them hooked on it?
I mean, I think it's got to make sense for the content and for the, for the content and the context, right? So if I'm making something that I want people to just like pick up and like they just want to play for 5 minutes, make that 5 minutes really good and entertaining, but also realize that you're not going to teach like super deep concepts. It's the flashcard thing. And, I think also you got to kind of guide your players through that process of learning. And there's a lot of different ways that you can do it. But like, I think you gotta kind of show them what they're going to be learning, but don't like force it down their throats. You can't just like say, okay, this is a math problem and you have to solve it. You kind of have to present it as, okay, so you have like, here's all these gems and you got to combine the gems, to, in a particular way to solve this puzzle. Once you learn, if you're teaching them through that kind of like system-based learning, you kind of present them that challenge and get them interested in that challenge and then slowly pull it away and say, actually, hey, you're doing this particular actual real world task. There's this game called Dragon Box that did that extremely well, which I'd recommend everybody check out.
Dragon Box. Awesome. So now, creating a game can be very long and difficult, and I'm pretty sure you had some bad moments. So give us like a personal experience of your most difficult moment, and it could be an obstacle or emotion you have to overcome, and be detailed and give us that story.
Oh man. All right. Yeah. So one of the things that I've been privileged to do with this whole game development thing is I've actually like acted in a lot of different roles. I'm primarily a programmer, but I've done, like we've been talking a bunch about design. But I've also been kind of like a producer / engineering manager kind of person, for a little bit. And we were working on this big launch that was, when I started working on that project, that launch had been 6 months delayed already.
Oh, wow.
And everybody was miserable, but it was a bunch of young folks who were really excited about it. So like they still had a bunch of energy, but they were kind of starting to get a little dreary. And I started working on this project, and even with like finally, like an actual engineering manager and like a whole, we rallied the team, we got everything, we kind of pressed really hard towards the end. And it took us another year to finish that and actually launch. And then after the launch, there was more stuff that we had to do. Whenever you launch a game, you're never really done. It's like the next like 3 months are also dedicated to continuing that launch. And I had I planned a vacation to go meet up with a bunch of my friends from college down in New Orleans. And I was like, okay, done. I'm going to go down to New Orleans and I'll see y'all later. But when I said that, I also said, if you need anything, give me a call or, send me an email or something like that, which mistake number one.
Yes.
And so, when on my way down there, I took a train trip. So it was like a 5-day train trip and it was awesome. I would recommend anybody who wants to, who is interested, take a really long distance train trip. You'll learn a lot of really cool stuff. But anyway, so we were at the end of the train trip and I get an email and a phone call almost simultaneously from my boss, saying, this thing has blown up and I need you to work. And I spent like the first 2 days of that, 4-day vacation working on this thing remotely.
No.
And I'm visiting with my friends and, these are people I haven't seen in quite some time. And so I'm just like, it was really bad. And it got so bad, I called up my roommate and I told her, like, I was like, hey, I'm thinking about staying here. If I told you to pack up all my stuff and send it to New Orleans, would you mind? And fortunately, she had the good sense to say, yes, I do. Don't move to New Orleans. Come back. And, and I did. But yeah, I was ready to just like up and quit. And the reason that I was ready to up and quit and just like, move, was because I hadn't taken for the previous year and a half, and I guess more really, I hadn't really taken enough time for myself. And I hadn't really done a good job of like delineating, okay, this is me time and you are not going, this is time for myself. So I think like that's like a really good lesson for people who are learning, especially people who are like just starting out in the industry. I think that's a really good lesson for them to learn because, it's really easy to just be like, I'm really excited about making games. I'm really excited about this project and just completely burn yourself out. And that's when that's when you start getting into really bad stuff. And that's when you start really making some mistakes. So don't do that. Just like, weekends are weekends. Keep it that way. 9 to 5, maybe 9 to 6. Keep the rest of your night as much as you can. Keep the rest of your night to yourself. Obviously do the work that you need to do in order to actually keep your job and, move up in the industry. But like, make sure you take time for self,
Yeah, and your health is so much more important than, finishing the game. And you hear all these stories about people working overtime, and, especially crunch time and stuff like that. It's sad, like how game development can like destroy relationships or destroy people's health or finance and stuff like that. And I wish it wasn't like that. That's really crazy that, and you even want to like move to a whole nother place and cause your roommate to do it. That's like how far it goes. That's crazy.
I crossed the bridge into New Orleans and was just like, New Orleans is just such a beautiful city that I'd move there in a heartbeat anyways. But like, I crossed the bridge and I was like, my first thought was, this is different. I don't have to do anything here. And I was, I was just like, done. Catherine, send all my stuff.
So what do you want to make sure game devs take away from an experience like this? Because it is some really important when it comes to one's person's health and, separating that business and personal side. So what do you want to make sure game devs take away from that?
I just recognize that, this isn't life. Making games is really, it's a good thing, and it's it can be a very rewarding thing. And I know a lot of people who really love it, and I love it, but it's not life. There's all sorts of other stuff to do out there. And like, it's, a person can't live just making games alone.
Mm-hmm.
You gotta make sure that you get other elements to your life and be proactive about it too. Yeah. Just make sure that you're looking out for that.
And speaking of being proactive, what do you consider your best investment you've ever made? And it could be investment of money, time, or energy. And how did you decide to make that investment?
So when I first started working out, so after I left Mind Snacks, I kind of fooled around a bit doing contracting work and stuff like that. And I ended up in this place called Phenomena. And I'd been introduced to a friend by a friend to their CEO. And she told me that, they were looking for someone to kind of like come on, like maybe part-time, maybe do a little contracting, because they had some projects that were like, maybe, that they needed a little bit of help on, but they weren't really willing to dedicate all their resources. So and I was looking for a job, and it seemed like it was, they seemed like interesting projects. They were like games for health, that kind of thing. So I was like, yeah, let's do this. And then I decided to kind of invest myself a little bit more in the company, because I was like the only person that was really working on these projects. And I could have very easily just been like, all right, I'm going to go in, do my work and leave. Because this is a contracting thing and I don't really care. But I chose to invest myself in a little bit in the company and then the people, and in their other games too. And I think that really worked out, because then when the kind of the money dried up for those other contracts, they brought me on full time. And actually, I think those were like, a couple of the best years of my game development experience, just because it was a really great company that I decided to make my investment in.
Awesome, man. Now that the game industry is moving pretty quickly and is booming, what is the one thing you are most excited about today?
Oh, I love the fact that all these tools are like the Unities and the Unreal Engines and all this stuff. All of those tools are getting better and easier to use. It is so cool to be able to watch like little kids just pick up, or like Scratch or things like that. Just pick up these engines and make something in like an afternoon. I had the privilege of being at a game jam for high school students, a little bit over a year ago. And like, these are kids who, when I was their age, we were learning like Java and like kind of fill in the blanks, kind of programming, where my teacher would give us, he would give us the whole program minus like, I don't know, a couple lines of code, and we had to figure out what line of code or what we needed to write. And then that was the end of the assignment. These kids are capable of making their entire game by themselves. And I just think that's amazing. Like, it is so cool to watch. And like, it's such a validating experience for them too, to watch them play that, watch them like make a game and then play that. It also means that a lot of hobbyists can come into the scene. Like you don't have to be a professional now to make a game. You can just like decide that you want to make a video game that tells a funny story, or you want to make a fun little physics toy. And you can just do that. And I think that's amazing.
Yeah, and there's so many options, not just Unreal or Unity, but like a game maker or RPG maker. Like there's so many tools out there, and most of them are free now as well. So there's like no excuse to not use any of these tools.
Yeah, it's so cool. And like I love the games that are coming out of it too. Like Donut County? It's this game where you basically like you embody a hole in the ground and you have to like move around and like swallow up little things. And, like, it's silly. It's so great. I think it's out on Steam now, so I guess that the kind of like counteracts my like hobbyist or great thing. But like it started out as a hobby project, and someone found it and was like, you should make this into a real game. But they, it's just like it's silly, and nobody would have thought of that before, and it's pretty great.
Yeah, hopefully we see more of that crazy ideas. Awesome. Now we have reached crunch time. So crunch time is where but we're going to crush it though. So basically crunch time is where I'll be asking you a lot of questions at a fast pace, and you'll be giving us, valuable information. And of course, Ted, you're going to crush it. So you ready for this?
Sure. Let's go.
Okay. So what was holding you back from becoming a game developer?
Honestly, nothing. I've been doing this, or I've been trying to do this since I was a teenager, and I've kind of just been able to do it. I guess sleep.
Yeah, sleep. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
So when I was a kid, I had a music instructor who told me, I used to play trombone at the time, and he told me that I could learn to be really great at playing the trombone or be pretty good at playing the trombone, trumpet, and tuba. And I kind of looked at that and said, you know what? I kind of want to be pretty good at like everything instead of being really great at one thing. That's definitely the best piece of advice I ever got, even though it wasn't what he intended. What's
a personal habit that contributes to your success?
I try to exercise every day, at least for 30 minutes. And it just like, it gives me, I get up in the morning and I go for a run, or I go like train in my boxing gym, and I like, that just clears my head and, gets me ready for the rest of the day. And no matter what, even if I have a lousy day, I at least did that. And I think that's really, really important.
Yeah. It's so important to stay healthy because that affects your mind. And, when your mind's healthy, you perform better. Share an internet resource that game devs can use.
All right, I got two. I've been using Task Hero, which I think might be in beta right now, but I think it's taskhero.com. It's a task tracking software that has like a bunch of little like kind of fantasy RPG kind of things on it, and that's been really fun. It's basically Kanban, but with Skyrim attached to it, and so that's been really useful. And then I've also been hanging around on the Game Developer League Discord, and it's a really great community that has a lot of really very helpful people on it. And also me, I try to be helpful sometimes. But yeah, Game Development League Discord is definitely like my favorite internet thing right now.
What's your current favorite game?
It was Kerbal Space Program for a long time. I've been playing a lot of board games recently, and there's this one called Formula D that we played for an entire weekend at my brother's bachelor party. It's like a Formula One racing game, but in a board form. It was awesome. Absolutely recommend it.
So now this next question is a bit of a doozy, so take your time if you need to. Imagine you woke up the next morning in a brand new world and you knew no one. You still have all the experience and knowledge you currently have today. Your food and shelter is taken care of, and you have a laptop. What would you do step by step on the path to become a great game developer?
What would I do step by step? I think I would go and I would go somewhere that really inspires me. So I think for me, it would probably be like maybe somewhere like the American Southwest or something like that. And I would go and I would hang out there for a couple days, get really inspired. While I'm there, I would try as hard as I could to meet like 2 or 3 artists and a music guy or girl. I mean, I guess it does not matter, but meet a musician and a couple artists. And then I would start working with them I mean, I guess my game development process would be just like, I'm going to follow this feeling that I have and try to do as much as I can, create as many mechanics as I can, get my artists to, work with my artists to make as much art as I could to kind of evoke that feeling. But it would probably take me about two or 3 years and even to get to that point. But yeah, I would go somewhere, get inspired, and then meet as many people that could help me do something really, really cool as I could.
Awesome, Ted. It's been a pleasure, man. Go ahead and give a parting piece of guidance and how we can connect with you.
So if you want to hit me up, my website is tedaronson.com, TEDARONSON.com. Or you can find me kind of everywhere on the internet at, TEDW4RD. It's an old internet joke. But yeah, hit me up and I'd be happy to chat with anybody.
And a parting piece of guidance.
Oh, parting piece of guidance. Have fun with it. If it's not fun, don't do it. If it is fun, keep doing it.
Ooh, nice one. All right. Hey, thank you so much for sharing your journey with us with Game Devs. And for that, we are truly grateful. And we look forward to your work. So until then, we will catch you next time.
All right. Thanks a lot, man.
Thank you, Game Devs, for listening. And remember that knowledge is only potential power. Execution is the game. So equip yourself with the best loadout and take action today. Go check out GameDevLoadout.com for all the resources. You can also subscribe to my email list to get an awesome freebie or contact me for feedback because I would love to hear what you have to say. Until then, join me on the next episode. T-Chan out.